Greetings all and welcome to Lucas Sprues. In today's video we're going to be doing an inbox review of the 2020 Airfix 1/72 scale Bristol Beaufort Mk.1. Before we get into this one, I'd like to give a massive thank you and shout out to Matt Austin, who donated this kit for my upcoming Milne Bay film, which I'm currently writing the script for. He's got a really great channel where he unboxes a lot of vintage kits, especially Matchbox ones, which I really enjoy watching and would definitely recommend, so I'll leave a little link to his channel in the description and probably in the cards up there as well. But anyways, without further ado, let's have a look at this kit. So as usual for my inbox reviews, we'll start by having a look at the box, followed by the instructions, then we'll have a close look at the plastic parts, the decals, and then I'll give a final sort of conclusion from my initial impressions of this kit. So starting off with the box, we have some very nice CGI sort of generated artwork from Airfix, which is pretty typical of them at the moment. And this one's got a little bit of a snippet of history in the corner, saying it is depicting an attack on Brest Harbour from April 6, 1941, where a Bristol Beaufort flown by Flying Officer Kenneth Campbell dropped a torpedo and hit the German battleship, and I apologise for my pronunciation, Genau, and put it out of action for 6 months. And in doing so, they were sadly shot down, and Campbell was posthumously awarded a Victoria Cross. So quite a fantastic story and a very gripping scene there, which is very nicely captured, and I really love that little bit of history to this kit. And in the corner, we've got the Airfix logo, followed by the 2 schemes included, one of which is the aircraft depicted on the front there, and we've got another one in a different camouflage. And then we've got the Airfix titles down the bottom here, with the 1/72 scale in the corner, and the title of Bristol Beaufort Mk.1. On the bottom, we've got all of our various warnings and the barcode, and a little sticker or print saying that the decals are made by Cartograph. On the side here, we've got a repeat of the box art. And on the very top of the box, we have a little history snippet of the Beaufort itself, talking about its service history and a little bit about its development. And we've got the 2 schemes included, which include the one from 22 Squadron, flown by Flying Officer Kenneth Campbell. And we've got another one here from 217 Squadron, which has apparently attacked the German cruiser Admiral Hipper. So some very interesting and historically significant aircraft by the looks of things. And as typical for Airfix, we have nothing on the underside of the box. So I'll pop this one open now. And although I got it obviously from someone else, it's still pretty much in a pristine shape, with all of the sprues still sealed. And we've got our instructions here, which we'll have a closer look at. And of course, the decals are folded in here within. I forgot to also mention before we look at the instructions that you also have your Airfix flying hour token in the top here, and a little guide for what Humbrol paints you will need to paint the particular aircraft schemes. Although it looks like you need both, or all the colours except for 29 and 30, which is just for A there, so pretty common colours. And as for the flying hours, I believe in Australia it's not quite as easy, but if you're in the UK and part of the Airfix Club, you can redeem them and get free kits, or you can also donate them to various charities over there. Moving on to our instructions, as is typical for Airfix, they're in a booklet format, which I am a big fan of, and you've got a little bit of more detailed history about the aircraft and some specifications in various languages on the front. Then opening up, we've got some sort of assembly instructions, which are useful if you're sort of just beginning or want a little bit of a refresher on how to go about making model kits. And you've got your assembly icons in the bottom. It would have been great if they included a sprue map, but not always necessary, as usually Airfix sprues are pretty clearly labelled with all of the part numbers. Moving on, assembly begins with step 1, and it looks like you start with the bomb bay here. And it notes that when building this model with the torpedo fitted, you have to drill out 3 holes in part C18 as shown in this diagram, and refer to steps 95 to 101 on pages 16 and 17. So a little bit of a different assembly here with this torpedo fitted, but otherwise it should be pretty similar to other Beauforts. Then going on to step 2, you start with, I believe, the radio and wireless operator's position there, with a seat moulded to some sort of interior details there, which you then glue to the rear part of the wing spar. Once that's assembled, you can glue that to the upper side of the bomb bay position. And then you've got, looks like his table and the various bits of equipment he'd be using, which gets glued to a rear bulkhead here, and then that gets attached to the front there. We've also got this position here, which appears to be some more sort of framework or some sort of walkway part, and I believe a point which the pilot's seat would attach to. And as you can see, the diagrams are pretty clear and laid out and nice and spread out between the various steps, so it's pretty easy to see where all the parts go. And you've also got the colours pretty clearly marked there for the interior colours and various components, so that's quite nicely laid out. Turning over the page, we appear to have the sort of pedestal details with all of the engine controls, which goes sort of in between the pilot area and the walkway here. Once that's installed, you've got the floor for the pilot area where the rudder pedals will sort of go. And for the pilot seat, you've got this separate piece here, which sort of contains like a headrest and then the main seat. Once that's attached, it gets glued to another bit of framework and some various bits of equipment here, and then glued to the front of that bulkhead there. Moving on, you've then got the instrument panel, which comes as a single piece with a decal for all the gauges, and then you've got a set of rudder pedals which get attached to that, and then glued to the front piece here. Then you've got this other piece of equipment here which gets glued to the front of the instrument panel area, and we appear to have a nice control column here which gets glued to the floor for the pilot, and then we've got the navigator / bomb aimer's seat which gets glued to this piece here. Then on the underside or the rear part of the cockpit we have this bin here, which I'm not too sure what it is. It may be a toilet, I would suspect, but I'm not 100% sure. Looks like you've also got an option here to open up the door or add a machine gun, which I believe some Bristol Beauforts were fitted with, so some interesting choices and nice features included there. Then once you've assembled the cockpit floor section as seen, and you've also decided on your machine gun and made those modifications, you can then install the main cockpit interior assembly to the left fuselage half. So quite a complicated looking bit of assembly there, and I don't believe it's over just yet, because if we turn over the page, yep. We've then got our navigator's table here with various bits of equipment molded to it, which looks pretty nicely detailed. Then we've got our tail section, or the tail wheel bay there, with a bulkhead for the front, and then a little bit of a sort of piece at the back there. We've got another bulkhead door area which separates the radio / wireless operator's position from the rear, and then on the other side we've again got a piece here to remove and a window to add. And once you've done that, you can add the single pilot figure that's included and join the fuselage halves. I'm hoping that we get some other crew members, because it would be a little bit weird to have all of that cockpit detail and a figure included but only have a pilot rather than the whole crew of 4. But anyways, moving on, we've then got this piece here for the turret to go to, or attached to, which gets glued to the rear of the fuselage. And then we've got some interior detail parts for the bomb bay area. Then we've got 2 hubs for the wings, which get attached after you've installed the landing lights. And it appears there's only landing lights on the right side, and the other side it's just the 2 wing halves. And once those are assembled, you can then slide them onto the wing spars. So a pretty similar assembly to the Bristol Beaufort kit with those wing spars, although a little bit more complicated and detailed for the interior. Turning over the page, you've got the other wing, and once those are in place, you can attach the flaps. Looks like we've got 2 options for flaps here, and then you've also got your ailerons, which I'd imagine you could pose in either a raised or lowered position for the flaps, and you could deflect the ailerons as you please. Then we've got our horizontal stabilizers here, which you can't pose the elevators by the looks of things, as they're molded to the lower piece there, but you do have a upper piece here for a little bit of extra detail, which once glued you can then install to the tail. Then we've got our rudder here, which again you could probably pose that if you wanted to. And then you've got the landing gear, which as in most British World War II aircraft, it seems to be rather complicated. You've got various little pieces which have to be assembled, but knowing Airfix, they should go together pretty well and quite precise. But once you've built the various bits of framework, you can then add the rear bulkhead here, and then the 2 halves for the engine nacelles, which get glued to the top of the wings, or the bottom there. Looks like we've also got a bulkhead for the front of the engine nacelles, so quite a fair bit of detail for the landing gear area, which is good. Turning over the page, we've then got some intakes here for, I believe, the oil cooling system on the top of the engine nacelles. And the engines themselves consist of 2 halves here, with a little spinner which gets installed between the halves for the propeller to attach to. And then there's this front sort of piece here, and once that's attached, you can add the 2 halves of the cowling, followed by the cow flaps. It doesn't look like you've got an option to have the cow flaps open, but that's alright, they do look quite nicely detailed as is. And once you've assembled that, you can add the exhausts and then glue that to the front of the engine nacelle. On the opposite page here, we have a repeat of that assembly, but with the parts for the other engine. And again, once that's all assembled, you can then add that onto the wings. It looks like there's a lot of keying and specially designed parts to help line everything up, so it should go together quite precisely. Although knowing Airfix, if there is a fit issue, you'll have to do a little bit of sanding, otherwise the entire model will then sort of suffer. But for the most part, should be pretty good. Then at this stage, you're moving on to all of the clear parts, and as is usual for a bomber, there's quite a lot of them. We've got one here for the main windshield area for the pilot, followed by a small one here on the side for the walkway area. Then you've got the forward compartment for the navigator's position as a piece here, with another part here separate for the bomb aiming window, so quite a fair bit of glazing to deal with. Then over here we've got our bomb bay doors, which you can either have shut or open, as seen here. And as for torpedoes, I believe you basically, by the looks of things, have to cut this part here open, so quite a lot of fiddly bits of assembly. I believe all of the aircraft in this kit have the torpedo, so it looks like you'll probably be only doing this step, where you sort of cut the middle section of the bomb bay out, but glue these doors shut, and then you can add the torpedo. On the next page here, we have our landing gear assembly, and it appears we've got an option here for the wheels to be in the raised position, although you still have to do a fair bit of assembly of various bits of framework. But basically, you've got two halves of the wheels there with a main sort of set of struts, which then get glued to a wheel door and then glued to the inside of the nacelles. The tail wheel appears to be in the same position, whether the main wheels are raised or lowered, so that's fixed into place. And if you want the wheels to be extended and on the ground, you've got a fair few bits of strut assembly to add. And once you've done that, you then add some wheel or landing gear bay doors, which appear to sort of snap into place with a fair bit of framework to help line them up. And once you've done all of that, you then glue the two wheel hubs together, which appear to have a little bit of weight molded into them, which is a nice touch. And you can then attach them to the main wheels, making sure to line the aircraft up with the ground so that the weighted part of the wheel is flat or flush. Looks like we've then got some more bits of framework for the wheels, and once you've installed that, you've then got these sort of exhaust pieces which get added to the underside of the wing, followed by some antennas and various little air intake accessories for the wings. Then we've got our turret here, which looks to have some very nicely done details with a lot of framework needing to be assembled. And once that framework's been assembled and you've painted the various parts, you can then add that to the main base for the turret, followed by the two machine guns, which look like Vickers. And curiously, they have one that appears to be sort of upright and then another one tilted on its side to sort of fit the drums for the machine guns, which is quite a cool feature. And once you've done that, you then glue the main glazed pieces for the turret assembly to the turret. And I'd imagine, yep, you then install it to the turret and add this sort of roof to make it nice and flush. Then we've got another clear part for the front of the aircraft, and this is like a sort of barbette turret. I'm not too sure if this was featured on all Beauforts. I've seen quite a lot that don't have it. And I'm not quite sure how the controls work, but it looks like you've basically got a transparent piece here, which a 7mm machine gun gets glued into. Moving on, we've then got our torpedo, which I believe would be a standard British type with the large bars or sort of fins there to help stabilize it. But once you've assembled the halves there and added the propellers and the rear shaft there to the torpedo and the fins, you can then build the bracket that sort of holds it in place and then attach that to the bomb bay. It looks like they've got the repeat of the torpedo bomb bay assembly here, which is a bit odd. I thought we'd previously already done that. Yeah, so I thought we'd already kind of done that, but oh well, I guess they've got that step sort of in there twice, which is a bit odd. Then we've got the pitot tube, which sort of sits on the underside of the nose there. And once the pitot tube has been installed, you then have the clear nav lights and the landing lights. I really like that they've done the nav lights in clear. I think it looks a lot better than if they were molded in plastic and you had to paint them, so quite a nice detail there. And finally, turning over the page, we have our extra machine gun for the rear and the propellers, which appear to have a little spinner dome on the top of them there. And once you've assembled that, you can then glue that to the little shaft here, which if you haven't glued to the inside part of the engine, you should be able to rotate the propellers. And lastly, you've got the various antennas and stuff that goes on the roof of the aircraft. So quite a lengthy set of instructions with 107 steps, although it's broken down quite nicely into lots of little sub-assemblies and very easy to follow steps, so quite nicely done there. Finally, for our instructions, we have the marking guide at the back here with the first scheme from Kenneth Campbell's crew, and as you can see, it's done in the dark green and dark earth with the sky undersides, and you've got a Humbrol color guide here, and it's all done in color, which is very nice. You've also got some nice little dimensions for helping to precisely measure some of the markings on the propeller there. And you've got a little painting guide for the torpedo and some very nice and clear stencil layout markings there. So pretty easy to follow and quite nicely done. On the other side here, we have Scheme B, which is the aircraft flown by Sergeant John Bell Rutherford. And it's done, as I mentioned, in the slate grey and sea grey finish, which is a nice contrast to the dark grey and, well, to the dark earth and the green. Interestingly, this torpedo is also done in a little bit of camouflage, so it's done in silver, but then they've added some black and what looks like some sort of red marking on the tip of the torpedo. So a bit of an interesting touch. I believe Airfix are usually pretty accurate with their markings and do a fair bit of research, which is really awesome. So overall, instructions are pretty good, and the marking guide is very nicely done in colour there. Moving on to our plastic parts, as you can see, we have quite a lot of them. We've got 5 light grey sprues and a set of sprues done in clear, so quite a lot of parts here. Well, I'll open this one up. And as you can see, as well as there being quite a lot of sprues, they are also really quite large ones too. So a lot of parts to make up this kit, but we might as well start with the one here. So this sprue contains our wing halves, which as you can see have some very nice recessed details for all of the panel lines and access hatches, with a few raised details where appropriate for various raised panels, and also these little accessories and sort of intake pieces on the upper surface. And for the inside of the wheel well, we've got some very nice raised riveting or ribbing details, and a few little access hatches and those sort of things. I think we've got some machine guns as well on the wings here with some little recessed ejector ports, although I could be mistaken, those could be for some equipment. And then we've got our flaps by the looks of things in the corner here. They seem to have a bit of a sink mark in all of these, which might be a moulding error, or it could just be that it's part of the aircraft's flaps and they do have a bit of a divot in them on the underside there. All of the intakes and smaller sort of circular parts on the wings here are pretty cleanly done without any flashing, so it looks like a pretty fantastically moulded set of sprues there. For the next set of sprues, we have the engine parts here with some very, very crisp and nicely done recessed details for the engine cowlings. I really like how they've done the handles there for sort of accessing the cowling. They're quite nicely detailed. And yeah, the engines also look quite nicely done. The center gearbox part there especially has some absolutely fantastic looking raised detail. Although given the fact that I'm going to be doing this for Milne Bay, it's going to have the Pratt & Whitney engines, so I won't be using any of these parts. But if you were, they look like they're really fantastically done. The engine cowlings or nacelles themselves also look pretty nice with some great recessed details and also some recessed rivets for the access hatches. And for these little sort of access doors, they've got some raised hinges detailed, so that looks really good. We've got the sort of part here for the propellers to attach to for the spinners, and we've got one of the bulkheads which actually has some recessed panel or rivet detail on the inside there. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, but it's quite fantastically detailed there. We've also got some raised details on the edges there. Nothing on this side, although I don't think it's going to be super visible anyways. Then we've got our bomb bay doors, which are recessed into this piece here, which looks pretty good, followed by our bomb bay interior details and sort of cockpit floor areas. There looks to be a mix of raised and recessed details with some fantastic recessed rivets on the inside of the bomb bay and some raised ribbing where appropriate. On the upper surface of this part, we have the cockpit floor, which appears to have a lot of little sort of dots on it. I'm not sure if those are imperfections from the moulding. That's what it looks like to me. They're sort of these random little blotches and raised pieces of plastic here. So yeah, that looks like it's a bit of an error, but I'm sure that's not going to be super visible, and you could probably disguise it as some bits of mud or some dirt being traipsed in. And there's a lot of guide pins and ejector pin marks, but I think most of those marks are going to get covered, and the guide pins will be very helpful lining up all of the interior parts there. Then we've got the front bulkhead, which I believe has the sort of wing spars molded into it, and some nice raised ribbing details. Not super detailed, but still pretty good, and it's quite fantastic they've even bothered to mold a lot of that. Then we've got our propellers here, which are very cleanly molded and have some nice details on the center hub there, which look great. We've got our main pilot's pedestal with the various engine controls, very nicely molded there with some very good crisp detail. We've also got a lot of the recessed access hatches in various parts for the interior there. Quite a messy looking cockpit in my opinion, but I think a lot of British World War II aircraft do have quite crazy cockpit layouts with a lot of mess everywhere. I'm a bit more used to my German aircraft that are a little bit more well thought out. Then we've got the rear wing spar section with what looks like some pulleys and cables for parts of the controls. And yeah, nothing really apart from some markings or parts to help line up other parts for the inside there. We've also got our landing gear doors for the retracted position, which look pretty good. And yeah, it doesn't appear to be any flashing either on this sprue, which is fantastic. Apart from, of course, these what look like errors on the inside of the cockpit floor there, this sprue is quite fantastically done, and you've got a nice little bit of detail on it. Next, we have another set of sprues with most of the smaller detail parts. So in this corner, we appear to have the cow flaps, which interestingly aren't recessed. They're actually raised, which I'm not sure if that's super accurate and correct, but I could be wrong. Then we've got some interior parts of the bomb bay details with some actuators and some very nice raised details for rivets and all sorts of little bits of wiring, so quite fantastically detailed there. We've got our bulkhead for the tailwheel section, along with what looks to be the navigator's table with some very basic squares to sort of act as his navigation equipment. So that looks pretty decent as well. This appears to be the sort of cradle that the tailwheel is attached to. Not too sure what these parts are. There's quite a lot of little fiddly bits. They may not even be used on this particular variant of the aircraft, but there's these little strange bits here, along with more strange bits here. Then we've got what appears to be our bomb bay doors in the open position with a bit of recessed and raised detailing on the inside of the doors there, which look pretty good. This appears to be our rack for holding our torpedo. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on the Milne Bay Beauforts, because I believe they were using American torpedoes, but I'd imagine they probably used British attachment points, but I could be mistaken. They might have had their own rig done up for them. We've got our spinner covers here for the propellers, which look quite nicely done, along with the air intakes for, I believe, the radiators for the oil on the top of the engines there. And as you can see, they've done a really nice job with the opening there, sort of doing it as a drilled out hole, so quite fantastic. We've got our ailerons here, which have a very nice and subtle fabric texture, with a bit of recessed detailing for where the trim tab on them is, so quite nicely done. We've got our torpedo here, which is very cleanly molded with some nice recessed panel details. And then we've got our machine gun here, which has some very nice recessed detail on the barrel and some fantastic detail on the base piece here. This looks like our turret, which is quite cramped and small. And it's got some nice raised details there for lining up the parts. We've got our massive fins there for attaching to the torpedo. And we've got our two main struts here for the landing gear. These appear to be the doors for the wheel well if they're in the open position, with some very fine and crisply done raised ribbing for the interior of them. And in this corner we appear to have a lot of interior parts with some sort of bulkheads and small detailed parts. I think these might be for the rear of the main wheel wells with some fantastic raised ribbing. And we've got our instrument panel here, which unusually for Airfix actually has some really fantastic raised and recessed details molded to it. So that's going to look absolutely fantastic. Hopefully the decal will still conform to them quite nicely. Otherwise though, you could probably get away with just dry brushing them with a little bit of white. But yeah, I really love the detail they've gone to with that instrument panel. It looks absolutely fantastic. We've also got our exhausts here, which are not drilled out and do have a little bit of a seam line on them, but you can easily neaten those up. And we've only got one figure by the looks of things, which I think is a bit strange. I'm glad that they've included a pilot, which is something Airfix usually does, although it's a bit odd that you'd only have one guy when there would have been 4 crewing this aircraft. I assume that they've done it because it would have been really hard to fit them into some of these really cramped spaces, but it would have been nice if they'd at least included 4 figures that you could cut up and pose if you wanted to for this aircraft, but oh well, at least I guess you've got the one. And moving on to the second last of the light grey sprues, we've once again got a lot of really small fiddly and quite cleanly and fantastically detailed smaller parts. So in this corner here we have some sort of strange square piece here, probably some sort of interior part. Then we've got the pilot seat there with some nice recessed detailing to it and some nice attachment points, followed by the rear kind of plate that the pilot seat gets attached to. There is an ejector pin mark on it, but it will be hidden by the seat. We've got the rudder pedals and the control column there, which look pretty nicely done, followed by some of the various antennas for the exterior of the aircraft. That looks like the main door for the rear of the plane with the little window cut out of it there. This appears to be the piece that sort of goes over the top of the turret to sort of aerodynamically blend it to the fuselage. We've got various bits of radio equipment there with some really crisp and nicely done details for buttons and raised switches and that sort of thing. We've got another panel here for, I believe, the radio and wireless operator with some fantastic details there as well. Sadly, I'm guessing a lot of that's hidden, but I guess you could have the door open and see a fair bit of it still. We've got various other small accessories like these parts here for the landing gear. These look like those sort of small exhausts on the wings. This appears to be our torpedo propeller blade by the looks of things. And then we've got this mysterious stowage bin or toilet. I suspect it's a toilet because I believe that is where they would have been positioned by the door. We've got the seat here for the radio operator's position and the navigator's seat there, which looks like it would have been thoroughly uncomfortable to sit in for a long period of time. Then we've got the sort of extra seat there for the bomb aimer to sit himself in, and the rear details where the pilot seat would attach to, so that's quite nicely done. Looks like we've got more doors for something, but I'm not 100% sure what for. This appears to be another turret, so I wonder what that other bit was. Yeah, that's a bit odd. We appear to have two different turret assemblies, so I'm not sure if there's a different tooling that uses the other turret or something like that. But anyways, for some reason we've got two that look like that. Then we've got various machine guns. We seem to have 3 of these Vickers machine guns and the door mount system for one of them. We've got our landing lights there with some nice little bits of recessed and raised detailing, and a lot more antennas. Here we appear to have part of the main turret assembly there with the rear gunner's seat and the various details and framework that it attaches to, which all looks quite fantastically done. There's a few of these little ejector pin marks that have to be cut off, but for the most part they're really fantastically done. And finally we have the various landing gear parts along with even more antennas, and yeah, all of the struts there are really nicely done with some great raised details. I really love all those little rivets on the main sort of strut pieces here. Those may be part of the bomb bay, although I think they're just more of the very complicated landing gear assembly. Along with the torpedoes, propeller blades at the rear, and we've got a very fantastically moulded tail wheel there with some very nice crisp details. So on the whole, all of the details are very crisply moulded without any imperfections, and they all look really quite nice. Finally, for our light grey sprues, we have the main fuselage pieces here, which contain some very nice recessed details for all of the panel lines and the little handles for helping the crew to get up into the aircraft. We've got a few raised bumps here for some of these sort of access hatch hinges, but for the most part it's all recessed. There's a very strange bulge to the underside of this aircraft, but I'm assuming that's quite accurate for it, but it is a little bit interesting to look at. So it looks like they've done a really nice job with that detail on the fuselages there. This side's a tiny bit different, not having the door cut out of it, and a little bit more of a cutaway here for those window pieces, but it's pretty similar otherwise. And on the inside of them you have even more detail with some fantastic, very crisp raised ribbing for the interior parts. Plus we've got various bits of equipment for the pilot and navigator's position, as well as even more dials and switches on the other side there, so a very fantastic amount of detail. Then we've got our horizontal stabilizers here with the elevators with a very nice and still quite subtle fabric texturing to them. On the upper surface you've also got some very nice details, and then you've got the other half here with again some nice recessed panel lines. We've got our tailpiece here, which sadly I don't think I'll be able to use because I believe the Australian Beauforts have a different tail, but it's quite nicely done as well, with some very nice fabric texturing and some raised circular details for those access hatches and those little, I think they were lights at the back there. We've got more bits of the landing gear here, although I believe that's for if the wheels are retracted. Then we've got the turrets, and it appears we've got two different types. So I suspect one is for a later variant of the Beaufort, and I believe this larger one might be for the Mark 1. Either way though, you've got those various optional parts there. Then we appear to have some more bulkheads here with some basic but still quite crisp detail there for maybe an oil tank or something inside of the engine nacelles. And finally we have our wheels here with some very nice and cleanly moulded hub details. Nothing too much on the tyres, although I do like the weighted moulded look to them. It would have been nice if they included a variant that didn't have that moulded weight, so if you had the aircraft in the landing position with the gear down, it would have been doable. Although obviously I guess most people are going to either have the aircraft on the ground where it would have that weight, or in the air, in which case the landing gear would mainly be retracted and you're not really going to see half of the wheel anyways. So yeah, quite nicely done. And for the most part, like everything else, these sprues are very cleanly moulded and have some really nice details. Finally, we have our clear parts here, which I shall open up. And as you can see, they are pretty fantastic as well. There's a fair bit of curving on a lot of these parts, but there's almost no distortion if you sort of look through the rounded windows there. There is a little bit on these kind of corners there, but given how curved they are, that's still really quite fantastic. And there doesn't appear to be any scratches or any nasty imperfections on any of these parts. And they've done a really nice job doing some very crisp raised details for the framework around the clear parts, so that should be reasonably easy to mask up. Although, of course, a lot of people I'd imagine are going to not want to do this kit because of how many windows there are. Interestingly, on this piece, we appear to have some sort of circular recess detail on the interior. It might be for an antenna, although it does look a little bit warped and strange on this piece here, but never mind. The other little details, such as these windows, are very nicely done. I really like those nav lights being done in clear. You could paint them with some Tamiya clear red and clear green, and they're going to look fantastic. Windows for the sidewall look pretty good. And I believe we're using this turret for this kit, although as you can see there's another option for a smaller type of turret there, which is for obviously a different version. And we've got our turret here for the front of the aircraft and our lights there, which look pretty good. The last thing to have a look at in this kit are the decals, which, as the box said, are done by Cartograph, so they're going to be of really exceptional quality. We've got a few different common roundels for the different schemes, with the B scheme here and A scheme here. And then we've got a few common stencils, such as these sort of marking areas and the gauges. And it looks like we've got a few white stencils for the darker camouflaged aircraft, and we've got black stencils for the brown and green one. The only issue I can see is there does appear to be a bit of splashed ink or something on the white part of this decal. I don't really want to scratch it and cause any damage, but it doesn't appear to be coming off very easily, so that doesn't look so great. Although you could probably paint over that with a tiny bit of white paint and not really have any issues. I probably will be able to actually use some of these decals, because even though I'm doing RAAF markings, which famously had the red painted over, at the time of Milne Bay they still hadn't done it to all of the roundels. I believe they'd only just started doing it to the wing roundels, and they didn't do it to the side fuselage roundels and the fin flash until later. So yeah, the detail on these look pretty good, with some nice detail on those gauges there, which look pretty good. And all of the fine writing there seems to be quite readable, especially if I zoom in. You can see all the Tessel here and the lift here markings. So yeah, quite fantastic looking decals. And like I've said, it's nice that you've got both the brown and the green and the sort of more unusual slate grey and green kind of camouflage. So quite a nice choice of markings and quite significant aircraft as well. So that pretty much wraps up our look at the Bristol Beaufort Mk.1 from Airfix. And I have to say, I'm really quite impressed with this model. There's some really fantastic details, especially on the interior, and the exterior still looks pretty great as well. They've definitely stepped things up from their Bristol Beaufort tooling, which already is quite nice, and added some really good crisp details. And yeah, some very nice choices of markings, great decals as usual. And although there's some very fiddly assembly to this kit, it looks like the instructions are pretty clearly laid out and it shouldn't be too difficult if you take your time. So typically this one retails for around about 50 AUD, and you can even see a old price tag in the top there which says the same thing. Although I believe Airfix have retooled or reissued this kit and it's now around about 60 AUD, so it's starting to get a little bit more expensive. But given the level of detail and the number of parts and choices, it looks like still a reasonable price. Once again, very big thank you to Matt Austin for sending me this kit. I'm really grateful that he did it. I've been really looking forward to trying out the Airfix Beaufort and doing a conversion of it to the Australian built version, especially after how difficult and painful the High Plains Beaufort kit was to put together. I'm looking forward to a bit of a more detailed and also easier build. So I'll have to 3D print some new Pratt & Whitney engines, and the tails were slightly different. I believe though otherwise all of the parts here should be accurate to make a early RAAF kit out of the box. So if anyone's got any suggestions or other details to keep an eye out for, definitely let me know. Out of the box, looks like a fantastic kit with some great details, crisp molding that's very cleanly done, pretty easy to follow instructions, great quality decals, and I would definitely recommend this one, and I'm very much looking forward to having a build of this once I've designed the parts, done a little bit more research, and have got a little bit of time. So thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and also consider subscribing to the channel as it really helps out. And please feel free to leave any questions, friendly corrections, or any opinions you have on this kit in the comment section below. And if you want to give my channel some extra special support, please consider joining my Patreon page to not only help me fund buying these kits, but also the products I use to make them, and also my longer term Milne Bay film project, which I hope to start filming towards the end of this year or early next year. Once again, a big thank you to Matt Austin for this lovely kit. I pre-recorded this video a couple weeks ago, and currently I should hopefully be recovering from my wisdom teeth surgery, and once I'm through with that, I'll be ready to move on to making the next build video, as well as some longer animations and stuff that I've had planned for a couple weeks. But anyways, that's it for now, and until the next video, as always, take care and model on.